Alrighty, we have some more cards, and most importantly, Taric has been revealed, and oh my god, this champion is absolutely nuts. Just wow. And we thought Unyielding Spirit was broken. Let me tell you, this card is pretty freaking good. So we're gonna see if the support archetype can become a thing. But besides that, if you guys are new to the channel, welcome. Don't forget to subscribe. We got tons of Legends of Runeterra content, competitive tournament play. I cast, so you get some cast as well, and card reveals and decks, all sorts of stuff. So don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button if you like the video as well. But without further ado, let's get into these new cards, baby. Alright, so I alluded to Taric. We're gonna get to Taric in a little bit here, but at the very end of the video, I'm gonna say one card. I'm gonna mention one card's name. It's a card that nobody ever plays, like ever, like period, at all. It's not played. I'm gonna say that card because now I think that after these cards have been revealed, that card will have a place in this game now, and God, I can't wait to play it. So anyways, let's start off with the very first card, and we're actually gonna start off with Gem, which is a token. So gems are a thing, obviously going with the Taric theme here. This card intrigues me for multiple reasons, right? Firstly, this card, it can't actually be played in response to anything or in combat. It is a burst spell, so it's going to resolve instantly. You're not passing priority on your turn to use this spell, which is really the big deal there. You don't want to just spend 1 mana just to pass priority back over. It does allow you to chain things together. And basically, to me, that's just, okay, it's like a worse spinning axe, right? Because spinning axe, you do have to discard a card, but you can do it in combat, especially on something that has quick attack like a Draven. You trade a little bit better with your opponent's units. However, this card can combo with a lot of other cards that we're going to actually go over here just a little bit as we get through some more of these cards. The second thing that comes to my mind when I think this card is Ezreal. Alright, so I think that, like, Riot, this shows me that Riot is not really concerned too much about Ezreal. And you're going to see why I mentioned Ezreal here in a little bit, too. One of the cards, it just gets you a lot of gems. We're going to see that here in a second. And, you know, obviously, 1 mana burst spells, I mean, Ezreal loves that. Mushroom Clouds, anybody, right? So, just shows me, I think, Riot's not worried about Ezreal, which could possibly be a good thing. So some other things that come to mind with this card are some champions, right? So we have something like Fizz, Vi, or Lee Sin. Fizz in particular, sometimes you get those awkward turns where you want Fizz to be elusive, but you don't really want to play a spell. You want to play the spell in response to your opponent's spell to, you know, possibly negate something, right? This, you can't play it in response. So being able to buff your Fizz by 1 attack and give it the elusive attribute that he needs is going to go a long way. As far as Lee Sin and Vi, those are both inherently OTK-based cards, right? You buff up a huge Lee Sin, it'll Dragon's Rage what it's going to attack, going to do a lot of damage to the Nexus. Vi, you buff her up with a lot of gems or something like a Vault Breaker over and over again. She's going to have a big attack, plus she does 5 damage to the Nexus every time she challenges something. So definitely works quite well with all 3 of these champions. So even though we've kind of placed Targon in between Demacia and Ionia as far as what the cards do and how the region is designed, it's good to see that it's actually, it's already looking like you're going to be able to combo this with other regions such as PNZ and Bilgewater and even Noxus to an extent as well with some of these support cards we've seen. So personally, I love this. I love OTK decks in general. I love combo decks in general. As much as I love combo decks, I am ready and just so ready for Ezreal to be dethroned, get another combo deck out there that does what Ezreal does, but maybe even a little bit better. Alright, so now we have, and this is why I went over gems first, and that's because a lot of these cards have to do with that gems token. So we have Gift Giver. So it's essentially a 1-drop that just puts a gem in your hand. So pretty simple, right? Seems okay. When you compare it to something like Coral Creatures, same cost after the Attune effect. However, with Gift Giver, you can actually play this on turn 1. Coral Creatures, you do actually have to wait until turn 2, which does matter when calculating some of those early game, different strategies and plays that you can take. Now, Coral Creatures, you could argue that Coral Creatures gets you like a more valuable 1-cost spell than a gem, generally speaking, the spells will be better than what a gem would be, but you could also get something that's worse, like a jettison, right? So I think that if there's other cards, I'm curious to see what other cards are going to be released that operate similar to Eye of the Dragon or Fizz or Lee Sin. Basically, if you play X spells or if you play a spell, do X. And depending on that will depend a lot on this card's success in the next format. And more specifically, because you can curve out Gift Giver into Coral Creatures into a 3-drop, I'm curious to see if they offer some sort of 3-drop, which we'll get into in a second. One of the other cards we're reviewing is actually a 3-drop that might work well with that sort of strategy. And speaking of 3-drops, Assembly Bot. I'm sorry, something in my throat. All right, so Mountain Goat. This is probably the first card so far that they've revealed that's kind of disappointing to me anyways. This card just kind of reminds me of why River Shaper was so terrible. Now River Shaper has 2 health for its strike effect. This, I think, for the same reason, having 1 health is just not going to be good. Now, granted, it does only cost 2, whereas River Shaper did originally cost 3. But I still think having that 1 health is a little bit too much of a drawback. I'd prefer this to be a 2/2 or even a 1/3 would be okay, mainly because a gem increases your attack. So I'd prefer that this card comes with less attack so the gems could actually just, buff the attack, right? Plus, you can't even utilize the heal out of the gem. You're getting a gem for a follower that has 1 health. So I don't think this will see much play as far as gems are concerned, or really at all when this set first drops. All right, next up is Mentor of the Stones. And so, all right, I love this card's design overall. We were just talking about a 3-drop for gems. Here it is. When this bad boy hits the graveyard or it gets its last breath effect off, you get 3 gems. So again, comboing this with stuff like Assembly Bot, like that card that I'll mention at the end of this video, which I think will actually blow up gems. I think it'll make gems super good. And that card, which was never played, super good. I just think in general, I'm super, super curious to see what other cards they're going to release that have effects of play spells, do X. And Vi and Lee Sin just scream like they're going to be competitive archetypes now. And I don't just mean throwing Vi into like random decks to support something like Ezreal or Demacia. I mean Vi as her own actual strategy. All right, so to re-emphasize a point that I made earlier on in this video, we have Shards of the Mountain. This literally screams Ezreal. All right, you play this, you fill your hand with 1-cost burst spells, poof, your opponent dies, right? Actually, technically, if you had all 10, this was the only card in your hand, you get 10 of them, that's 20 damage with an Ezreal on the board, right? Well, that's the dream. It probably won't happen too often. So, as much as this might seem like the ultimate machine gun Ezreal card, just, firing off rapid spells every single turn, lots of gems, it's not, and here is why. Generally speaking, Ezreal decks tend to have large hands throughout most of the game, usually because you're going to have to save a lot of those spells to go face eventually, or you play something like a Chump Wump. It adds cards to your hand, those 1-cost burst speed spells. And that's the thing about Ezreal. You have to gather those spells up. You can't play them throughout the game, and they have to go off when Ezreal is on the field, which is a pretty strict condition to meet without getting rid of cards in your hand. So, unless there's some other Ezreal strategy that pops up, which we may very well see, just because, obviously we have an entirely new region in Targon, I don't see you ever getting more than like 4 or 5 gems in your hand when you play this card in an Ezreal deck. And the other issue is, okay, now you're getting rid of that other region that has lots of removal that you no longer have access to. There's a reason why Ezreal is not played with Demacia. Demacia is mainly buffs. It doesn't have a lot of removal or targets. So far, the way they're building Targon looks to be the same. They have far less targeting stuff similar to Demacia. So I don't think overall they're going to end up pairing well with Ezreal. I don't think this will actually truly be that busted with Ezreal, but it is something to keep an eye on. Again, however, all right, Lee Sin, Vi, Fizz, scream awesome for this card, especially something like a Lee Sin getting that huge Dragon's Rage off. Would be really excited to see if Targon is able to fit with Bilgewater or PNZ or Ionia PNZ with Vi after all these cards are released. So definitely something I want to toy with in the future. Alright guys, we have Taric and... Okay, we have Taric and then we're going to go over his champion spell, and his champion spell is pretty nuts. Taric level 1. 4 mana, 2/4 stat line, so a little light on the stat side because he is a support unit, so no surprise there. Pretty much what everybody figured Taric would be. Because he's a support unit, he has the lower stats, his support ability is himself, and the supported unit get tough. So the first thing I want to note there is that this is one of the first champions, I think it's actually the first champion and the first follower ever, period, to have a support ability that also affects itself, which is pretty cool. On top of that, any card, any spell that you cast on Taric, so not card, only spell, any spell you cast on Taric that turn that is a single target spell will duplicate onto the supported ally. So just, you know, heads up, something like back-to-back will not actually work because it does target 2 things. Something like a repost. Any of those spells that add stats or add things to your unit will go ahead and get buffed to the other unit. So pretty awesome support ability. Like, can we just take a second, like, okay, oh, you mean I can get 2 Unyielding Spirits in 1 turn? Oh, that's, and I'm talking about the spell, not his level 2 ability, which, yeah, I know. We'll get to that in a second. You can literally Unyielding Spirit Taric, get another Unyielding Spirit on the subsequent unit that he supports. And wait a second, Bastion's a thing that we went over in the last video. Link to that will be in the description below if you want to check it out. Okay, first I Bastion, then I Unyielding Spirit. Now you actually can't counter my Unyielding Spirit. Yes, please. Oh, and did I mention the unit right next to Taric that he's supporting? Oh, it's Fiora. Yeah, it's Fiora. So, wow. And that's right, I think Zed is a card too, if I remember correctly, and his leveled up version actually copies all the keywords and stats. So now you're getting a lot of units with a lot of buffs. All right, so I just in general, I think it's great. I think his level up is incredibly hard, but for good reason. His level 2 comes with a built-in Unyielding Spirit, and not only that, it's 2 in 1 turn. 2 Unyielding Spirits basically on himself and the supported ally every single turn, and on top of that still copies spells that are cast. So he's his own engine. You know, he can get you card advantage through the use of spells. You're doubling up on your spells. That's huge tempo on the board as well. The only thing that worries me about Taric being released like this is he seems really good. Doesn't seem busted by any means. Seems like he has a lot of combo potential, first and foremost. But does this mean that Shen is just bad? Right? You know, Barrier versus this just doesn't seem quite as good. Now, his first level, though, Taric's first level is much weaker than Shen's, I gotta say. His stat line is weaker, and his support ability of basically only adding tough to himself and the other unit is probably worse than Barrier right off the get. But the addition of the spell being copied is actually, I think, stronger than Barrier, obviously depending on the spell that's cast, but I think generally speaking it's always going to be stronger than just putting 1 Barrier on the supported unit. So I don't know, this just concerns me that Shen is just going to get worse even after he was buffed recently to try to get a little bit more play, and I'm very curious to see how that pans out in the future. And last but not least, before I mention that card that I was talking about that I can't wait to actually try it out, we have Blessing of Targon, which is Taric's, you know, spirit animal, so to speak. It's his champion spell. And this is a 5 mana burst speed, pretty simple, +3/+3, and it's permanent. And there's a lot to be said about this card, right? So the first 2 things that come to mind are Standalone and Fury of the North. Standalone used to be 3 mana, and then it's +3/+3 permanently, but only if you have only 1 unit. Now it's 4 mana. With it being 4 mana, this being 5 mana makes sense. So I'm down with the mana cost. Fury of the North, same thing, costs 4 mana, +4/+4, but only for 1 turn. So I think as far as base level and power and, you know, the cost and everything associated, I think all 3 of those cards are generally in line right now. I think they're all healthy. So in comparison to Standalone, you basically are paying 1 more mana to remove the condition of only having 1 unit. And in comparison to Fury of the North, you pay 1 more mana and +1/+1 to have the buff be permanent. So when you look at it like that, I think it's just about as powerful as Standalone. I think it's a little less powerful than Fury of the North, just because Fury of the North does add that additional point of stats. And that's where I think this card might falter a little bit. I think it's pretty good. But at 5 mana, it's expensive. I think that people underestimate the difference between 4 and 5 mana. All right, in that card I promised you, Jay Medarda. Let's get it. I cannot wait to just gem on gem on gem on gem on a Jay Medarda, actually build a Jay Medarda deck, and it's probably going to be some sort of combo OTK deck that just draws a lot of cards, right? And I am hyped for that. I think it's awesome that they've built a set that so clearly seems to improve the power level of some of the most underplayed cards from the first 2 sets. So with that said, thank you everybody for watching. Hope you guys are as excited as I am. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below as to these cards, what you think of them. Are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? What are you most excited for? And as always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.